So I found the three poems written by the same author very interesting. So the first one was The Runners, which instantly I thought were the refugees because they are the ones running from the country. And that kind of, became more evident as I continued to read the poem. And they basically talked at first about how abusive the regime was and how they were bad to children and themselves. And one quote that stood out to me was, "They kidnapped Jesus and stole our memories." Oh, how bad it was in Syria. And just that they kidnapped Jesus and stole memories are two very bad things. And they stole everything and left him with nothing, which they put him in Palestine, which they basically had nothing compared to the regime. And it was kind of interesting how they even came back to America and saw all the horrifics going on TV, and that was them on TV getting talked about and how bad it was going on. But sometimes it was still, America stopped letting refugees in, which is just horrible. And that kind of connected that poem to that everything going on in the U.S. with not letting refugees in, or the runners in this case. And the second one was Does He Think? And at first it was talked about the civilians being played like a toy and how the dictator, al-Assad, can just kind of control all of the civilians and kind of shape the country how he wants it to be because of how abusive he was to the children and to the civilians themselves, and how the civilians really didn't have any choice but to go back to him because he had the land, he had all the food, and the civilians couldn't live without him because he was the leader and the ruler. So even though they were being abused, they kept having to go back and back. And that's probably what eventually led to the revolt, because of all this buildup of emotion, of hatred towards al-Assad. And it was just kind of shows how manipulative and controlling the rulers of Syria are. And they kind of knew what they were doing, and they were not being nice to the civilians at all. And the third poem was a very realistic poem. And this one was very interesting because it did talk about love, which is something that's kind of overlooked when talked about Syria, because you don't really think about the emotions of the people going on there. You kind of just worry about the facts and what's exactly happening. And they said it was about a guy who couldn't find love and couldn't fall in love. Actually, he would find love. He'd find love in every single country, go from country to country, meet all these women. But since he was a refugee, he kept moving, and every day was unpredictable. He didn't know where he was going. So it kind of showed how even though he's able to find a lot of women, he could never fall in love with them. And it made him build up this mindset that he can never even fall in love and feel love the same way, because he doesn't know when that love is going to get taken away from him, like it did with all these refugees and their children and their families. And it was just horrible. But that's what these poems really made me realize and learn about.